Well, the players are ready in the feature match area, so let's head on down there where we'll watch Don Deloja versus Franklin Folks. That's Domain Rhinos versus Esper Gorios. On your left, Franklin Folks on that Esper Gorios. On your right, Don Deloja on Domain Rhinos. And we're underway. To note, our backup matches are their teammates, and we are going to be trying to do some experimental holding of the matches so that we try not to have any matches finish off camera, as well as just show y'all as much magic each round as possible. We have an explosive start here from Franklin Folks. We got the turn 1 Grief Scam, exactly what you want if you have Grief and Not Dead After All in your deck, and Don Deloge are down 2 cards before they're able to even play a second land.
Yeah, and when your opponent pitches Undying Evil to cast the Grief on turn 1, you
You're
know.
You're
You know there's another one.
You're in some trouble.
Yeah, Dawn left here with just some lands, a Shardless Agent, and a Lorien revealed, so really hoping to get to that Shardless Agent in a couple turns, and that will stabilize the battlefield against this Grief.
That's kind of the best part about Rhinos in general, though, right? It's a army in a can. You know, they have so many cards that basically just generate a ton of pressure. Rhinos were always pretty good against the scam opponents, and Franklin Folks here, while we're on a different type of scam, you said Espergorios. This looks shockingly like
Yeah.
Rakdos scam.
Okay.
We were debated by the director. Sorry, folks. So no Espergorios, no Traxas, just normal old scam. We got scammed by the director. But old Jerry Thompson has recently been, running the Esper Gorios deck with like Solitude, Grief, and Ephemerate. So it's easy to confuse because of the Grief Blink package. Here's a Dothi Voidwalker. Dawn going to fetch in response. Down to 18. Likely going to go get maybe one of those Surveil lands.
And looks
Electric
like
Portico.
Yep. Hey, just digging a little bit further, and that Dothi Voidwalker is going to make the Rhino plan for stabilizing for Dawn a little awkward, because the Crashing Footfalls will get exiled with one of those counters, and then the Voidwalker can put 2 Rhinos on Folks' side of the battlefield. So, once the Rhinos trade off, then the Grief can keep chunking in, or if one of the Rhinos trades for the Grief, Folks will be left with a Rhino of his own to keep the pressure on Dawn's life total.
All right, heads up play from Dawn. Gonna go fetch Portico, trigger on the stack. We're gonna basic island cycle the Lorien Revealed. Gonna find island so we don't take damage on the following turn to cast that Shardless Agent. And now Voidwalker is gonna resolve, and Franklin gonna jam in here with Grief. Dawn's gonna be down to 14 after it's all said and done. Franklin still has the ability to do something with mana as well, so may go land Thoughtseize if that's something available.
Yeah, that would be a solid play because there is a second Shardless Agent in Dawn's hand. So taking that out would be very helpful. The second set of Rhinos, if Folks cashes in the Dothi Voidwalker immediately, that second set of Rhinos could really stabilize things for Dawn. Because then you'd also have a couple Shardless Agents. They could team up and trade for one of Folks' Rhinos or trade for the Grief.
All right, well, here's Shardless Agent, and that's going to be a forced find of Crashing Footfalls. Going to make 2 4/4s, but it does get exiled by the Voidwalker, as Ross pointed out. And Folks going to be able to perfectly emulate the Crashing Footfalls on the following turn. Ooh, I saw it. Another Not Dead After All in hand, and we can do that on the Voidwalker before activating too. So we have the potential to match the next Shardless Agent as well.
Folks could also send in with the Grief, and if Dawn goes to the double block with 2 Rhinos, you can Not Dead After All the Grief and get another discard spell out of it. Either play very, very powerful for Folks here in this spot.
All right, let's see what Folks wants to do. Only 2 lands, but that hasn't really stunted his growth so far. Here comes the Grief.
You can't be thinking too much about this. Just send in confidently. If I'm in Dawn's spot and my opponent's thinking about this attack, there's got to be something in their hand that makes it interesting.
All right, we go for a triple block here. This is basically just covering as many bases as possible. Any combination of removal spells is not going to protect the creature. Grief. Franklin going to let it go. Trades with one of the tokens, really valuing that Dothi Voidwalker body, and who can blame him?
Yeah, I think that's perfectly reasonable. Just decided that the Dothi was more valuable than another Grief.
All right, and now the roll token is gone too, so the roll token will come back on this Dauthi Voidwalker as well. And 1 damage dealt to Dawn down to 13. 2 tokens from Crashing Footfalls coming.
And now the second Shardless Agent for Dawn here will leave her with 3 Rhinos and 2 Shardless Agents. That will stabilize most of the battlefield, but still has to find an answer to the Dauthi Voidwalker. And notably, the roll token now on it pumps it up to 3 toughness. So Fire, Ice, and Dead Gone are not answers to it. That could have been a subtle sort of tiebreaker in the decision for Folks last turn, whether or not to keep the Grief around with that second copy of Not Dead After All, or the Dauthi Voidwalker, getting it out of the range of most of the removal from Dawn's deck. Going to need to find a Leyline Binding to answer that one.
Now, real interesting rules interaction here. Normally with Dauthi Voidwalker, when you sacrifice it and you play the spell, that spell goes back to the opponent's graveyard. But because the Dauthi Voidwalker returns immediately, the Crashing Footfalls gets exiled again by the new iteration of the Dauthi Voidwalker, which means that you kind of can chain that together.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Are you jealous?
I'm a little jealous.
Yeah, I'm a little jealous.
I wish I had an army of rhinos.
Yeah. All right. Well, Franklin Folks looking like he's doing a better job of making rhinos than Don Deloger's rhinos deck. Dauthi Voidwalker pretty strong there. Ooh, Teferi Time Raveler a pickup for Dawn. Let's see if she wants to go for a bounce effect on that Dauthi Voidwalker to prevent another Crashing Footfalls next turn.
Could also just answer one of the rhinos, but dealing with the Voidwalker could potentially stop 2 rhinos if you can then find an answer to it next turn.
All right, Shardless Agent over the Teferi. Let's go get Crashing Footfalls. And it looked like Dawn drew a Crashing Footfalls for turn as well. So I would imagine that's going to go into the suspend zone this turn. I'm not sure the game is going to last long enough for that one to come off, but maybe.
Maybe these rhinos are going to bounce off each other. So there's 5 rhinos on the battlefield now, but I imagine 4 of them will be off the battlefield relatively soon. And the real question is, can Dawn hold off this Dauthi Voidwalker for long enough? Right now it's a 4 power creature with Dawn at 12. That's a 3-turn clock. If we bounce it next turn with Teferi, not only does that stop a turn of attacking automatically, but when it comes back down for Folks, it'll be a 3-2, and it'll be another 3-turn clock with Dawn at 8.
All right, trades come in. Rhinos trade.
So I want this token.
All right, we're going to go back Folks' way here, and we'll see what he can do. I saw a Fatal Push hanging out. It's a Thoughtseize drawn for turns. Maybe Thoughtseize Fatal Push, play a Crashing Footfall. That's a pretty good turn.
It's a pretty good turn, but still may not want to cash in the Voidwalker just because the evasion with Shadow is so important on this battlefield.
Yeah, but 2 4/4s with Trample, both offensively and defensively, probably worth. You can also do it at instant speed.
How interesting spot here. If Dawn just goes for a single block, Folks could have, if you're going to Fatal Push the other Rhino, you could have Fatal Push the one blocking and got 4 damage it.
That's true. Maybe just trying to simplify the battlefield, though.
Folks with another copy of Not Dead After All. That is excellent. So we get the best of both worlds. 2 more Rhinos and the Dauthi Voidwalker stays around.
Yeah, and 1 drain too from the roll token as well.
So that'll drop Dawn to 11. That means the bounce on Teferi turning the Voidwalker into a 3-2 might not be enough to buy another turn. This Voidwalker has been incredible for Folks in this game.
Yeah, it's an excellent card. There's a reason why it's been so prevalent in black decks over the last couple years. It's really making a comeback, in the last few months.
Yeah. Folks is channeling his inner Mia Hamm from the 90s Nike commercials with Michael Jordan.
Oh my God.
Anything you can do, I can do better.
That's where they play horse and just like throw it off the. Oh, she's doing it with the soccer ball, right?
Yeah.
Kicking it around. Yeah. Remember the one with Larry Bird playing with Michael, and they were just like banking it off the building and stuff.
Yeah, that one's even earlier.
We're old. All right, so Don plays Teferi, bounces a Rhino token instead of the Dothi Voidwalker. Now that means that the Voidwalker can't just play the Crashing Footfalls here, but I have to imagine that that Voidwalker is going to chunk in and take care of the Teferi this turn.
Yeah, so folks can Fatal Push the last Rhino for Dawn. Now the two Shardless agents can team up to trade with Folks' Rhino. That'll mostly clear up the battlefield, but there's still that Dothi Voidwalker. After all it's done this game, it could stick around and finish the job for Franklin Folks here in game one.
All right, well, with this Teferi in play, it seems like Franklin is going after the face. This Voidwalker, you know, is Shadow, so basically unblockable in the spot. And now the Voidwalker here is going to just chunk in for 4 damage instead of killing the Teferi.
Okay.
Valuing the aggression a bit more.
Gotta wonder if there's maybe a Lightning Bolt in Folks' hands there that can finish off Dawn next turn. I see a Subtlety. That was a land off the top. Much going on. There's a Fire Ice, so the fire can't kill the Voidwalker because of that roll token, but Ice can tap it down and buy Dawn a little more time.
All right, Teferi ticks up, past the turn. Voidwalker coming in hot. I saw a third land pick up Fable the Mirror Breaker online. I see a Terminate and a Bowmaster, I think, hanging out over there.
Bowmaster's another one that could finish this game off if Folks is able to get really one more attack in with the Voidwalker.
All right, here it comes. Any responses? Down to 3.
Interesting. Dawn deciding to hold the Fire Ice here, potentially to answer a Bowmaster, but leaving herself vulnerable to a Lightning Bolt.
Yeah, I think just really wanted to get full value out of the Subtlety, but unfortunately for Dawn, Franklin's about to jam Fable of the Mirror Breaker.
Okay, well, the Fable token gets checked by a Subtlety, in combat at least, but there's just so much other value attached to that card that you now have to worry about, but it's really there's sort of 2 steps here for this game for Dawn. She needs to find an answer to the Voidwalker, and she needs to get these 2 Rhinos onto the battlefield. If she can do both of those things, and there's a second Fire Ice.
That might do it. That just might do it. Now, normally, Ice tapping Voidwalker would not be that big of a deal, because then you could activate the Voidwalker to play a card. But with Teferi Time Raveler in play, Ice is actually just going to become something pretty awesome. Ooh, are we just going to double fire the Voidwalker now? Okay. We're going to go down to 2 life. But we know Franklin Folks has Terminate in hand, so I think this is all she wrote. Dawn empty.
Yeah, I was wondering, there's another line available there for Dawn. She could have held up both Fire Ices, tapped down the Voidwalker, then the Teferi's on 3. Next turn, you could bounce it with the other fire left back in hand to answer it once Folks recasts. That fire could have also dealt with this Goblin Shaman after the Terminate on the Subtlety. But instead, I think the Terminate is going to be lethal here in game 1 for Franklin Folks.
All right. There goes. Franklin Folks takes game number 1 with Rakdos-Scam. The powerful turn 1 double grief start. Not something many decks can defend against in this format. And Dawn falters there and falls because of it.
Dawn had that start covered. It was really the one Dothi Voidwalker that did so much heavy lifting.
Was it the 1 Dothi Voidwalker, or was it the 2 Dothi Voidwalker, or the 3 Dothi Voidwalker?
But Dothi Voidwalker gave Folks a use for those additional copies of Not Dead After All. Oftentimes, the Grief deck is left with those copies dead in hand, doesn't have a lot of ways to use them, and there's not a ton of removal in Dawn's deck that allows you to use it. She's bouncing with Teferi, she's exiling with Leyline Binding. So the Dothi Voidwalker giving Folks a proactive way to utilize the extra copies of Not Dead After All to good effect was really important in that game.
All right. Well, I have something that I'd like to ask you, Ross. Do you want to swap over to a match that's in progress and watch that while these players are sideboarding and then come back to this later? Or do you want to take a moment and talk about how these players are going to sideboard?
Let's just jump in.
Yeah.
Jump in.
All right.
More action.
Flipping over to Standard, we're going to be watching May versus Mangus. And we know that May is on the Temur World Souls Rage, the Temur ramp strategy that's become very popular as of late in Standard, thanks to World Souls Rage. This card is green red X, deal X damage to any target, and then you can put lands from your graveyard or hand into play X number of times, and use that in tandem with things like Nissa Animist as well as Virtue of Strength, and that gives you just tons and tons of mana. And then since World Soul's Rage is a fireball effect, it both ramps you and then kills your opponent later.
Yeah, this is a very explosive deck, and it looks like May is operating with every cylinder.
Good thing we tuned in just in time to see that fireball. World Soul's Rage.
Yeah, once this Temur ramp deck gets going, it is doing the most powerful thing in the standard format, and that used to be an honor reserved for the domain deck, which is what Mangus is playing. But now playing a matchup where the opponent is going over the top of what you're doing spells bad news.
All right, so we have May up a game, Dawn down a game, and we'll get updates on the middle match with Fumich and Woods in just a moment. But we're going to be going back to Dawn versus Folks in just a moment. Domain Rhinos versus Rakdos Scam. And once these players do finish sideboarding, is there anything interesting to note out of the Rakdos Scam deck sideboard to beat Rhinos? Maybe like a sweeper effect, engineering explosives, or anything?
So it does have 2 copies of Hidetsugu Consumes All. That is one that can clear away a bunch of Rhinos. Also has a 3rd copy of Shielder the Apocalypse. There's 2 in the main. That is a card that I always like against Rhinos because the 4/5 body helps you stabilize against the Rhinos.
Right.
And the life gain can be really important if you're forced into to take the back foot in the early turns. The rest of the sideboard here for Folks, not too exciting, though notably, maybe for later in this tournament, does have the splash for 3 copies of Pick Your Poison. So this is Jund Scam, technically. Over on Dawn's side, I see a couple copies of Dismember could be quite helpful, and a 3rd copy of Teferi Time Raveler.
Game 1. Okay, we have an update for the middle match, Fumich versus Woods. You said, which one? Fumich is up a game. So May, Fumich, and Dawn up 2 games to 1 so far here after the first game. All right, we'll be heading back over to the modern match in just a moment once these players are finished up sideboarding. On the other side of things, for Dawn sideboard, is there anything of particular note? Maybe Blood Moons? Something like that coming in?
I doubt these are 2 decks that both sideboard Blood Moon, so typically you don't bring in Blood Moon against other decks that also have access to it because they have built their deck to play through it. I do see 2 copies of Dismember, a copy of Teferi Time Raveler, a 3rd copy there. Those could be helpful in this matchup, just good disruption pieces, but nothing too exciting on Dawn's side.
Yeah.
Really just going to try to get her synergies online, whether it's early Rhinos or the Leyline Scion of Draco, that powerful combo that is sort of taken over Modern.
Yeah, but it's also caused a resurgence of the Garif scam package. Basically, if you mulligan for Leyline, or you just start with a Leyline, or even 2 Leylines in your opener, your hand is relatively weak on a normal playing field. Obviously, when you pair it with Scion of Draco, it becomes stellar, but those Griefs and Thoughtseizes can steal the Scion before it actually can come down, ultimately making you just with a enchantment that turns all Prismatic Omen, for those of you who've played with Prismatic Omen before. Unfortunately for Dawn, on a mulligan here, something you don't want to do very much against a heavy discard deck. I did see Radiant Flames from the sideboard.
That is a singleton in the sideboard. That was another one I was looking at that could come in good at sweeping away some of the early creatures, and especially Orcish Bowmasters.
Yeah. Unfortunately for Dawn, down to 5 and down a game. This is going to be an uphill battle here for game number 2, but I've seen Dawn come back from more spots.
And that's one of the nice aspects of team events is, Dawn not looking great in her match, but both of her teammates up a game, so they might be able to carry her this round and come away with a win regardless.
Yeah, it's one of the coolest things about team events is sometimes you lose, but you still win. It really helps having teammates like Ross Miriam and Harlan Fear to carry you, as y'all did a few years back when we played my last team event with y'all.
Gotta have good teammates. That's what it's all about.
Oh, yeah.
All about the gathering.
I think I heard Patrick Chapin say that one time, but I think he said the gathering.
Yeah, right. Looking at another hand here for Dawn, I do see Flooded Strand and the Lorien revealed, so it has 2 lands. Going to be able to operate this game. There's an Ardent Plea as a Cascader, a Leyline Binding, and a Fire Ice, so a couple early interactive pieces and a Cascader and 2 lands. That's a very solid 5-card hand.
I agree. All right, 2 go to the bottom. We're going to be underweight. Game number 2. Let's get it. Flood Strand, go.
So, could be a little awkward. I'm trying to think how Dawn might want to sequence these lands so that maybe she gets to do something on turn 2, but you also want to set up Domain for that Leyline Binding. So, taking a look at her mana base, the one Triome in the deck is a Xander's Lounge. So that could potentially be the first fetch, and then you untap and Island Cycle. But if you Island Cycle, you can't get to full Domain, because you'd have to find Temple Garden.
Yeah. All right, so it looks like that is what Dawn may be going to do. Temple Garden Cycle, go get Xander's Lounge, and next turn can go Xander's Lounge plus that Domain card for just 1 mana. No, going to go get Stevens instead, maybe looking to go Fire Ice on 2.
Yeah, so this will leave up more interaction on turn 2, but won't have access to the full Domain.
Yeah.
That was sort of the tension in the decision. She could have found Xander's Lounge.
Another turn 1 Grief. Let's see if we have the double Grief scam. We're going to start with... Okay, taking the Leyline Binding, and then we're going to take Ardent Plea and Not Dead After All. Well, starting to look like that's just true for Dawn.
Yeah, leaves Dawn with the Fire Ice, since because the Wicked Roll means that the Grief is above 2 toughness, so not too worried about that.
We can kind of skate it for a turn, though, by tapping it and drawing a card, and maybe that rolls us into an Ardent Plea or a Shardless Agent off the top. We did draw land number 3 for the turn. It's a Wooded Foothills, but Dawn maybe not wanting to give that information away. Also might want to fetch a basic next turn anyway. Going to go ahead and get that blue source down for Ice.
Yeah, I suspect we will see the Grief get iced. Dawn's going to need to find some action here. What we got, Dawn? It's a Lorien revealed. A little early for that.
All right, Ragavan is the play for Folks here.
Along with a tapped Blood Crypt, so keeping the pressure on.
Ooh, we picked up a Shardless Agent. It's a game. Mulligan to 5, get double griefed on 1, no sweat. Here's 10 power on 3.
Yeah, and there is a basic forest in Dawn's deck, so the Wooded Foothills can find that if she wants to preserve her life total. Yeah, no real reason to get another shock land here. It's not going to contribute to Domain. The only swamp in the deck is that Xander's Lounge, and you can't get that one since it enters tapped.
Yeah, and you also can't get any of the Surveil lands like Lush Portico. So forest it is, and we're going to go spinning in just a minute.
Excellent choice of basic forest. The
Spinning and
Invasion
winning.
John Avon art.
Ooh. Oh, I was always a big Avon fan.
I've played that exact forest many times.
Yeah. I play that exact forest alongside a bunch of elves during Onslaught block, Timberwatch Elf.
Yeah.
Wirewood Superman, Wirewood Symbiote. You're a Wirewood Symbiote fan, right?
Oh, yeah.
That was Onslaught. I remember that.
Wirewood Symbiote's from Scourge.
Onslaught block is the same thing as Onslaught. I'm sorry. It's not, but it should be.
One half of the Unbeatable Buddies.
Elf Visionary is the other one?
Yeah.
The Unbeatable Buddies?
Yeah, Unbeatable Buddies.
You are a weirdo. I love you so much. All right. 10 power. Are we going to go back to Folks' turn? I see a card. I don't know what it is. It looks kind of like a Sudden Shock, but I don't imagine that that's something you'd want in this matchup. Maybe it's just a weird Lightning Bolt?
Could be a Fable.
What's that front card there? You saw it? That's a Lightning Bolt? Here comes a Ragavan attack. Dawn, what do you do here? What do you do here? Do you open your Rhino up to dying to a Lightning Bolt? You have to block. This is a very strange attack.
We could just block with Shardless Agent.
Yeah, that's true too. The body on Shardless Agent somewhat invalidated by the 4/3 of the Grief at the moment.
So normally when your opponents make an attack like this in the Scam deck, you're thinking, oh, they have Not Dead after all. But that doesn't make sense because then the Grief would certainly be attacking. So
right.
You should be able to narrow it down to Lightning Bolt. But Dawn make the decision, wanting to trade the Bolt for a Rhino. That's still fine. The Rhino plus the Shardless Agent still trade for the Grief.
I have no idea where that bolt's from. It's like, it looks super dark. Baldur's Gate. Baldur's Gate's a great game, by the way. I don't know if you are super into RPGs, Ross, but me and my wife Callie have been playing that game a lot over the last couple months.
Dawn here with the cycle on the Luring revealed, finding that Thundering Falls, so gonna try to dig a little deeper into her deck to find some more action. And now up to 4 mana, close to hard casting any future Luring revealed, turning that into an excellent top deck.
All right, well, we're gonna get the Chevelle off the Thundering Falls top card. Dawn says good enough, leaves it on top. Now the question is, do we offer the trade with the Rhino? Are we in a defensive or an offensive position? I quite like the attack because you can't really block the Grief. But it is your only pressure point, and leaving the Grief around means your future removal spells are better. Ooh, do we have a Leyline Binding? Or maybe a Crashing Footfall suspend?
Yeah, but Binding would be 2 mana, so if she had that, she's probably reaching for both lands.
Muscle Memory, only paying 1 for Binding. Here's an attack for 4.
Getting aggressive. That certainly suggests Binding, but no, it is a Crashing Footfalls.
Okay. 4 turns till that goes off, but the top card is something that Dawn wanted, my guess. An Ardent Plea or a Shardless Agent. Most other things, I think, would have went to the graveyard. Here's a Grief coming in for 4. Dawn down to 10.
Could also be a Leyline Binding as an answer to this Grief.
True.
Or Teferi wouldn't be great because, well, Folks is pretty far away from hard casting that Grief again.
An attack for 6, and maybe the tables are turning in Dawn Deloger's favor. Here's a Shardless Agent.
Yeah.
Here's 10 more power.
Love that. Finds the Shardless Agent on top and realizes, oh, I can be the aggressor now.
And now if you're Folks, you have to imagine maybe it was a mistake not trading for that Rhino last hit.
Yeah, but he's been the aggressor the entire game.
Yeah.
And rightfully so. Just
turns on a dime.
Didn't realize, and obviously didn't have the information that Dawn had because of that surveil, that the tides were turning.
All right, 10 more power. Folks on the back foot, going to need Path of Peril or something similar here to clean all this up. Stuck on 2 lands. It looks like we're dead.
Yeah, I think that was a Shielded off the top. I see a Fable,
a
Thoughtseize,
bunch of uncastables.
Another Fable. Yeah, nothing.
Pack 'em in, Frankie boy. Pack 'em in. Game 2 goes to Dawn Deloger. Mold to 5. Double Grief. Not good enough.
It really is the story of Modern these days. There are individual cards that are so powerful that, mulliganing to 5, getting double griefed, you can recover from it if you find the right cards. Dawn found a Cascader on 3, found a Cascader a couple turns later, and that is a lot of Rhinos.
All right, 1-1 while we're waiting on them to shuffle up. We're going to move for a live looking in our Pioneer match in the middle seat. That's the Battle of the Jacobs, Fumich versus Woods. That's going to be Rakdos Vampires versus Atraxa Creativity. Woods on your left here. Game count is Fumich up a game. I'll get confirmation on that shortly, but I believe that's the case. It looks like we're pretty deep. We got a Vein Ripper on the table, so we just did a Soar and Tell. Here's a Chain to the Rocks on a Fable the Mirror Breaker, but no answer to the powerful Vein Ripper. This vampire is going to be chewing them up.
Yeah, only 1 card left in hand for Woods, so Fumich in the driver's seat here looking to take down this match and put his team ahead.
Yeah, a big smushing here. Big attack coming in for looks like 10. Woods down to 7. Going to need Supreme Verdict or something very similar off the top. And even then, very low on life thanks to Vein Ripper's triggered abilities.
Yeah, there's a couple verdicts in the sideboard, so if those are in the deck here, that would be an excellent draw.
Ooh, 2 lands! The game's over! Jacob Fumich wins the match! Takes one for his team, and we'll see if either of Fumich's teammates can close it out. Let's move over to the standard match and see how May is doing versus James Mangus. Because they may be coming to a close here, and we may be having their match finish here shortly. If we could get our spotter to pause the Modern match, Mr. Director, that would be excellent.
Yeah. A game that may not even need to be played out if May is able to take down this game against James Mangus. after her teammate just took down the match for their team. And she's making a lot of mana. That's usually a good sign.
Okay. Ross, I am relatively familiar with this Temur World Souls Rage deck, but I'm curious of your thoughts on it, because for me, this deck is kind of terrifying. It kind of operates in the same space as Wilderness Reclamation, big mana, like downhill sledding.
Yeah, and these strategies have historically been very powerful in Standard, so I'm excited to see it play out.
All right, on Mangus' side of things, we have a little bit of pressure. These Topiary Stomper is able to attack next turn with a land drop. We got a couple of up the beanstalks drawing cards, but May getting the mana-colored dice out is always terrifying.
Yeah, looks like we just flashed back a memory deluge, so May, digging into her deck for whatever she needs here.
Yeah.
There already is the Nissa Resurgent Animist on the battlefield. That is sort of step one in getting this engine online.
Now, Aftermath Analyst is a card that... Can we get that on the screen, actually? So, Aftermath Analyst, it's a really powerful 2-drop creature. It says you can sacrifice it to bring all the lands from your graveyard back to the battlefield, and it works really nicely with Cabaretti's Courtyard and those lands that are kind of like fetch lands where they come in, they sacrifice, gain you life. And it's one of the most important cards in this deck because of how it works with Nissa and all the extra lands.
Yeah, this is sort of one of the unsung heroes of the deck because it doesn't look all that powerful, but it plays defense against the aggressive decks, and then it becomes a really powerful enabler late in the game with that activated ability.
All right.
Okay, looks like it May just casting a Garen Brig growth there. So tapped out for now, but next turn is going to be incredibly explosive. Mangus has to do something here to
Ross,
either...
That wasn't a Garrett Brig growth. That was a Virtue of Strength being cast. That was the good side being cast. Now, next turn, May has triple mana. Triple. What can he do with triple mana? Tell me some stuff about this deck. What are they doing?
So really, they're working up to World Souls Rage.
Oh, yeah.
And with the Aftermath Analyst being able to potentially return more lands, like all of May's remaining turns are going to be incredibly powerful. And at 24 life, I don't know what Mangus can do to close out this game with any kind of speed. Does have 4 copies of Leyline Binding, so that's going to be the key card for him to find. But he needs it very quickly.
Yeah, and it's not even just the Virtue of Strength that needs answering. The Nissa also just generates tons and tons of mana with World Souls Rage and those fetch lands. So that plus Aftermath Analyst, the graveyard isn't that big for May. It seems like most of the things that have been put into the graveyard are Memory Deluge and Friends. But we'll see if Mangus can actually apply serious pressure. May at 24 life. It's going to be difficult to overcome, I think, in time.
Yeah, just the things that Mangus's deck is doing. This is meant to be the most powerful end game in the metagame, but it's not more powerful than the end game of the Temur deck. All those up the beanstalks, they look really cool. You're going to draw a bunch of cards, but if you allow May's engine to get online, she's just going to kill you.
Right. And one of the things about the Domain deck is that it spends a lot of time developing its own resources, kind of ramping and playing these like big haymakers. But those big haymakers are generally geared towards fighting like mid-range creature decks.
Yeah.
And they're not playing like a bunch of discard spells and counter spells. And those are the types of cards that you really need to fight Temur World Souls Rage.
Here you see Atraxa Grand Unifier, incredibly powerful card. It draws 2 extra cards off of the up the beanstalks.
Yeah, you think you're untapping?
Yeah,
you think
probably
you're gonna?
not.
You think you're gonna untap? Let's check out what May's about to do.
Normally, when this play happens, the Domain deck is winning the game, and you feel incredibly comfortable. But instead, Mangus is going to have to pass the turn and cross his fingers really hard that he gets to untap.
All right, does find a Stone Brain. That's actually a pretty huge deal.
Yeah,
but May just flashes in the World Souls Rage, and that's going to be game and match. May French and the team of French, Delosier, and Fumich going to take it down 2-0 over the team of Mangus, Woods, and Folks. So Awesome stuff there from May, casting the Virtue of Strength the turn prior. And Mangus says, hey, here's an Atrax, but May says, here's a Fireball. How's that
And
taste?
says, I'm the biggest kid on this block. Give me your lunch money.